In a land of darkness and horror, a brave adventurer named Solomon Kane journeyed to find the vampire queen of Negari. As he climbed a treacherous crag, he encountered a mysterious figure who pushed a boulder down the cliff, nearly killing him. Undeterred, Kane continued his ascent, using his sword and pistols to defend himself against unknown threats. At the top, he found a plateau and encountered a corpse nailed to a tree, pointing back the way he came. The message was clear: death lay ahead. Kane pressed on, undaunted, and soon met a giant black warrior who demanded to know why he had entered the land of skulls. Kane revealed his quest to find Nakari, the Red Woman, and the warrior agreed to lead him to her. As they journeyed together, Kane sensed that he was being led into a trap. The warrior's words were laced with menace, and Kane knew he had to be prepared to fight for his life. When they reached a natural bridge spanning a deep chasm, the warrior attacked Kane, and a fierce battle ensued. Kane fought off the warriors, using his rapier to deadly effect, but found himself cornered on the narrow bridge. Just as all seemed lost, Kane parried a spear thrust and ran his attacker through, saving his own life. Though wounded and exhausted, he stood victorious, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead in his quest to find Nakari. Kane, a skilled fighter, found himself in a precarious situation after being pushed off a bridge by a giant. He managed to land on top of his attacker, killing him, but not before they both fell into the darkness. Kane survived the fall, thanks to the corpse cushioning his impact. He found himself on a ledge part of the way down the chasm and discovered a cavern behind a dark shadow in the wall. As he made his way through the cave, he encountered bats, which initially frightened him. However, he soon realized they were harmless. As he continued on, he encountered a horrid scent, which led him to a terrifying creature with cold, expressionless eyes. Kane fought for his life, eventually killing the monster with his dagger. After escaping the creature, he stumbled upon a narrow crack in the wall, which led him to a dimly lit corridor. The corridor was man-made, with a peculiar phosphorescent ceiling that provided light. Kane explored the corridor, feeling like a ghost moving through the gray halls of death and decay. He eventually came across a wall with a low murmur coming from the other side. He made a hole in the wall and discovered a great chamber with stone walls, floors, and columns. A double column of feathered black warriors stood before a throne, where a young, tigerish black woman, Nakari of Negari, reclined. She was surrounded by grandeur, with carven serpents and dragons adorning the pillars and ceiling. Kane realized that Nakari was not the architect of this ancient place, but rather a spoiled child playing with a toy discarded by her elders. However, he also knew that she could become deadly in her game. As he watched, a tall, massive black warrior approached the throne, seeking permission to speak. Nakari's lazy indifference turned to attention, and she spoke in a language similar to that of the river tribes. In the city of Negari, Queen Nakari, known as the Gazelle of Negari, sat on her throne, surrounded by her warriors. She was furious with her chief, who had failed to kill a stranger, Kane, who had climbed the crags at night with a dagger in his hand. The chief tried to explain that Kane was a skilled fighter, but Nakari was not interested. She signaled to her warriors, and they killed the chief on the spot. Kane, who had been watching the scene, knew he had to escape. He made his way through the corridors, avoiding guards and finding a secret door that led to a great hall with giant pillars. He navigated through the hall, using the pillars for cover, and eventually came to a doorway guarded by 2 spearmen. He climbed the wall and entered a room through a window, finding himself in a luxurious chamber filled with silken couches and velvet cushions. In the room, he found a woman, Marilyn, who was a captive of Nakari. Kane had been searching for Marilyn for years, after learning that she had been kidnapped by Sir John Taffrell and sold to a Barbary rover. He told her his story of how he had sailed the seas, fought battles, and searched for her across Africa, finally tracing her to Negari. Marilyn was amazed and grateful, but also fearful of their chances of escape. Kane reassured her, saying that he had overcome many obstacles to find her and would not give up now. In the Gates of Hercules, a ship was attacked by a Cadiz slaver, and a young girl named Marilyn was taken captive by a savage chieftain. She was eventually brought to the city and became a slave to Queen Nakari. Years later, Captain Solomon Kane, a man driven by a hunger to right all wrongs, arrived in the city, searching for Marilyn. He found her, but soon discovered that she was to be married to a powerful king of the river peoples. Cain knew he had to act fast to save Marilyn from this fate. As Cain hid behind tapestries, Nakari entered the room, and her eyes seemed to gleam with vibrant and magnetic evil. Cain watched as Nakari caressed Marilyn in a lazy, amused manner, which seemed more like a sated leopard teasing its victim. When Nakari discovered Cain, she drew a dagger, and Cain revealed himself, pistol in hand. But before he could act, Nakari triggered a trapdoor, and Cain fell into darkness. When Cain regained consciousness, he found himself chained in a damp cell, with Nakari standing over him, her face sinister and sardonic. She questioned him about his escape from the cliff and his mysterious powers, but Cain remained silent. Nakari was fascinated by Cain, a white man unlike any she had met before, and wondered if he could learn to love her. In the land of Negari, Queen Nakari ruled with beauty and ferocity. She captured Solomon Kane, a landless wanderer, and offered him a deal, become her king and help her conquer the world. But Cain refused, wanting to rescue a white girl named Mara, who was promised to the master. Nakari was furious and imprisoned Cain, but later sent for him, offering him wealth and luxury if he would join her. Cain refused again, and Nakari left him to rot in his cell. Time passed, and Cain was eventually taken to Nakari's throne room, where he saw a strange picture on the wall. He pretended to be dying, and when the guards approached, he attacked them and escaped through a hidden door. He found himself in a long, narrow corridor, where he stumbled upon a stairway leading to a small landing with a barred window. Through the window, he saw the African landscape and realized he was in a minaret built on the outer wall of Nakari's palace. Cain explored the corridors, searching for a way to aid himself and Marilyn. He discovered a hidden door and found a cell where a man was shackled. The man, who was not entirely black, spoke to Cain in an unfamiliar dialect. Cain introduced himself, and the man asked about his origins and if he had sailed across the sea. Cain replied that he had, but was unsure about the golden spires of Atlantis and the crimson walls of Mu. I'm summarizing the tale of a stranger, Cain, who met a shackled man in a cell. The man, the last of his race, told Cain a fantastical story about the empire of Atlantis, which rose above the waves and ruled the world. They were a sea people, worshipping Valka and Hata, and their cities banded the world. However, the sea rose and Atlantis vanished, leaving only the colony city of Negari. The man's ancestors ruled Negari, but they were eventually overthrown by black slaves, who then ruled with the guidance of captive Atlantean priests. These priests, including the shackled man, held the secrets of the city and guided the Black Kings. However, they too began to mix with the slaves, and their bloodline became tainted. The story takes a dark turn with the rise of Nakari, a black queen who imprisoned the shackled man and sought to dominate the priests. She discovered the hidden passages and secrets of the city, which the Atlanteans had kept hidden for 1,000 years. The man spoke of Mara, a white girl brought to Negari by raiders, who was forced to participate in the bloody rites of the Black Temple. Cain learned that Nakari sought to unite Mara with the Master, a symbol of death worshipped by the people of Negari. The Master was once a great wizard of Atlantean Negari who conspired against his own people and aided the revolt of the Black Beasts. In the city of Negari, the skull of Nakura has been a symbol of power for 1,000 years. Cain, a Puritan, learns that Marilyn, a virgin, will be sacrificed to the god Galgar on the Black Altar during the Moon of Skulls. A dying priest tells Cain that to save Marilyn, he must kill the black priest behind the skull of Nakura, then bid the people to free Marilyn and sacrifice Nakari, the queen of Negari, instead. Cain navigates the labyrinthine palace, following the priest's instructions to reach the Tower of Death. He finds himself in a dark passage, where he must feel for a projecting spring to open a door. He then follows a stairway, turns right, and walks 500 paces to reach the Tower of Death. As he approaches the tower, Cain hears the chanting of worshippers and sees a grim scene. 2 lines of savage dancers sway and writhe, surrounded by a sea of black faces. On the black altar lies Marilyn, and beside her stands a masked priest with a glimmering blade. Cain sees his chance and kills a chief who has his pistol, then uses it to shoot at the skull of Nakura. A flash of intuition, Solomon Kane remembered the dying Atlantean's words. Their brains hinge on the skull of Nakura. As he shot the skull, it shattered and the Black Nagari people's symbol vanished. This triggered chaos, and the people turned on each other, becoming bellowing maniacs. Kane fought his way through the crowd to the altar, where he encountered Nakari, the queen of Nagari, who was crazed and attacked him. He defeated her and a giant, then freed Marilyn, a captive girl, from the altar. As they escaped, an earthquake struck, and the Tower of Death collapsed, burying the city. Kane and Marilyn fled through the jungle, pursued by the collapsing city's horrors. As they reached safety, Marilyn recounted her experiences, Nakari's cruelty, her whipping, and her preparation for the sacrifice. Kane explained how he escaped, found her, and fought through the chaos to rescue her. He reassured her that they would reach England safely, guided by a higher power that had protected them so far. Kane reflected on the fallen city of Nagari, its evil crimes, and its downfall. Kane, battered and bruised, stood with Marilyn, recalling the prophecies of Isaiah. He had witnessed the horrors, where people were drunken but not with wine, instead feasting on blood. Hand in hand, they approached the cliff's edge, where Kane had climbed in the dark of night. His tattered clothes hung from his worn body, but his eyes shone with a serene calm, reflecting the golden light of dawn, promising joy and happiness.